following Reza, we have the D, not the Durrani of Reza, but the D of R&D, the new show. Daniel Christian, who is here and is going to be talking to us about deep integration with SharePoint, almost continuing the conversation that we've been having this evening, which is really nice. And let me just bring up your details, Daniel. Again, somebody you really should be following. Daniel has got a wealth of content out there. Again, another SharePoint originator. So always lovely to have SharePoint people on the show. And you know, there's an awful lot of information on Daniel's channel. It's really packed with some really great stuff that I've been following myself over the years. So Daniel, I haven't seen you, I don't think, in person since since we met in Orlando a couple of years ago. But lovely to have you on the channel for the first time. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to take over the screen and introduce yourself and let us know what you've got.
Cool. Reza was speaking. All I heard from his session is SharePoint is the way to go. So that's all I heard. And that's why I'm doing a session on deep integration of Power Platform with SharePoint. So before we jump in, just a few things about me you already probably know. That's my Twitter handle, dchristian19. I do have a YouTube channel. If you just go and search for Daniel Christian Power Ups or Daniel Christian MVP, you'll find that. But I do like if you comment, because commenting, just like Reza said, is actually some of the ideas I get for future. So anyway, if you're interested, that's my information with it. But since we're talking about SharePoint, I thought I'll start with some history of SharePoint. I know there are some people on this call who've actually worked with SharePoint on-prem. I personally came right at this onset over here, actually right over here, SharePoint portal. So I worked with SharePoint 2003. Back then, it wasn't even called Server. 2003 was SharePoint Portal, and then I've seen it grow ever since then. So it's one of my favorite slides, which came up a long time ago. And gosh, now there's syntax involved over there. There's AI, but a couple of things that are about SharePoint is one of my favorite things that I talk about. In addition, when the time came to consolidate into the cloud, whether SharePoint itself or your on-prem content is getting consolidated to the cloud, this is again one of my favorite slides. Because this is all the stuff that SharePoint does on-prem, whether you're building forms, have any of your connectors for SharePoint, reporting systems, languages. One of the neat things I like about this is all of this can be migrated to the cloud. When it comes to forms and workflows, you've got Power Automate, Power Apps. When it comes to reporting, you've got Power BI. And for any of the custom solutions that you build, you've got all these services available on Microsoft side, which is Azure Services. You've got Microsoft Graph. You've got SharePoint Framework. You've got whatever you have on-prem. Granted, it's not a one-to-one transition or one-to-one comparison, but there's stuff that go up over here. Our focus today is going to be on these. What all can we do with the Power Platform over to the SharePoint? And so this is how I like to show it, is that, okay, all of these things can be done on SharePoint Online. And if you're interested, this is the low-code, no-code side, but if you're interested to kind of pop that hood and see how everything works, then this is what it is. This is how you have the low-code, no-code. An everyday developer like us can go in and work on it. These are all the underground plumbing work which is going on. But then there's also some heavy development work you want to do with Visual Studio, Visual Code, all of this jazz can be done. So how does Power Platform work with SharePoint? Well, it breaks it down into these 4 different categories. Power Apps, it is how you act. What are the actions that you're doing to add data to your data source with the SharePoint list? When it comes to Power Automate, how do you automate that data? And then when it comes to Power BI, you can analyze it. And then with Power Virtual Agents, how do you chat with the end user using the content that is available in SharePoint? And I'll show you some examples of all of them. Now, Reza just covered this content, so I won't go too much into it. But I put this in because this is a good time for me to transition over delegable data sources. Again, I won't touch into it because he just went through it. Key takeaways: SharePoint is a delegable data source, and what delegation means. It is the process to go ahead and work directly on the data source side. Some of us people who've been with on-prem, we always say, well, that's a server-side call. same concept is when you're pulling data, when you're processing data, you're not doing it in the app. If your connection is with SharePoint, you do it on the SharePoint side. It will do all the processing of the data, and then it pulls it over in the app. So delegation is a big word. Get used to that terminology. It's delegation, because once you start having that exclamation mark show up over there, you want to stay focused on that. So let's now jump and start talking about each of these things. All right, Power Apps, Power Automate, so on and so forth. Specifically with SharePoint as your data source. Remember, SharePoint is a delegable data source. So there's two types of Power Apps that you can work with. There's the customized forms, and then there's the canvas. These are the two big ones that you can use with. Now, there's some fundamental differences between the two. So let's go and talk about customized forms. With customized forms, you've got the fantastic option that is built inside SharePoint lists. You have a limited version of the Canvas Studio, but nonetheless, it gives you the full functionality to go ahead and build a form directly inside that SharePoint list. And then it also gives you the functionality. And this is a great example to go ahead and add and edit functionality, because you see a list, you want to go ahead and present the data in a nicer looking form, based on who's logged in. You can go ahead and edit the data, so on and so forth. Edit what people are able to see and all that jazz, user level permissions and all of that. Well, that applies to a customized form as well. It gives you all that functionality. And so, we'll just pause over here and switch over straight to an example that I have, because that's what I'll be doing. Instead of me showing you the slides, let me actually just show you what all you can do. So what I have now is a SharePoint list, right? This is a SharePoint list. And now I want to go ahead and actually see the data. So if I go and click on New, this is a customized form that is being presented over here. I've got the full, flexibility to go ahead and put in some information. My name, all that comes in. I can go ahead and put in, a drop down for the city that I live in. I can go ahead and put in the state. So I'll go ahead and put in, let's say I can put something and start searching for anything with Dallas. I'll search for that. I'll go ahead and put in any other, state that I live in. This is basically how it works in the United States. You've got cities, you've got states, and then I can go and pick in, okay, well, single bed, double bed, all of this stuff. It's basically a web-based form. As you can see, it has got a little bit dynamic feel to it. I've got a toggle switch over here, a toggle control. If I click on it, oh, there's a pet, something to do with the pet. If there's not to do with the pet, I can go ahead and unselect that one. All of this functionality you've got available directly inside Power Apps, in the SharePoint list. Gives you that same fidelity that you have with the old one, which is InfoPad Designer. Remember the InfoPad Designer one, which is, afterwards it got said that the end of life is coming and it's going away. Well, this is the successor for it. And I've got a little, exciting news about that. But not about that, but the fact that you can go ahead and take an existing InfoPad Designer form and you can potentially rebuild it. It doesn't automatically migrate, but you can rebuild the whole thing inside Power Apps, and it actually works. But here it is. Now, important things to point out about this is that it is able to handle some pretty complex column types. Over here, you can see the city and state. They are actually lookup and manage metadata type columns. If you're interested, let's go into the list settings. In the list settings, I can go and show you. I've actually, tried and tested the potential of this Power Apps, and I was actually very, politely, pleasantly surprised about this. There's lookups, there's choice type columns. Heck, I even did a manage metadata, and it works, and it works really well. So that's basically an example of how you can go ahead and use a patch type column. I mean, a SharePoint customized form. But keep something in mind. The good scenario to use a customized form is literally what it is. You want a customized form. The moment you start putting in galleries inside this customized form, you're going ahead and putting in other stuff in it. Just be a little careful, because it wasn't built for that. What it was built is, hey, you've already got a search right here for your list. Use it. You've already got a place to see, your existing tables type of functionality. You can go ahead and manipulate, the look and feel of all of this. You've got all of this directly inside the SharePoint list. So don't go and build a form over here and then add another nice looking gallery, or go ahead and add another, another table inside that form, because it kind of, beats the purpose of using a customized form for the sake of what you already have over here. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now there are examples, where you might want to go ahead and put in addition filtered a gallery. Reza, actually, his video that came out this week, he's actually given a great example of how you put a filter gallery, and based on the selection, he's actually got a map showing up. That's a good scenario. I think go watch his video, but that's a good scenario because that's where I would say that if you want to put a gallery inside an event form, well, that would be a scenario for it. But don't just go and select full gallery based on what you're putting over here, because it defeats the purpose. All right, so that's a very important piece about how customized forms are being used. Use it for its fundamental reason is to create a very simple looking in a custom, not simple looking, an advanced form, and you can go ahead and put some customizations to it. So that's basically the first thing about the customized form. But if for some reason that is not what you want, then look at Canvas apps. Canvas apps is a full standalone app which can be embedded into a SharePoint page. That's a neat thing. It is a full version of Power Apps customized Canvas Studio. What I mean by that is, if you go back to the customized form of SharePoint, it does open to the studio of the browser, but you don't have the option to do a save as. You don't have the option to do other changes to it and look and feel that, because it's a very small segment of the Canvas Studio. It's not the full fidelity when you get with this Canvas Studio. So kind of keep that in your back of your mind. Other neat things that you get with Canvas app is you've got artificial intelligence, you can machine learning, mixed reality. In fact, if you have time, we'll look at it. Otherwise, I've got full videos on mixed reality. All of these AIs and ML functionalities now come with Canvas apps, which you will need a mobile device for some scenarios. And those are not available directly inside your customized form. So I'm not saying choose one over the other. What I am saying is that decide what your use case is. Because if you're going to stick with the customized form, then have a scenario for that. But if you want to build a full app, then here's another scenario for it. I have seen companies saying that, I am going to build a Canvas app, but I'm going to embed it in a SharePoint page, specifically so that the people who are in-office desktop people who are working, they don't travel, they will still have the mindset that, oh, it's a form that I use. Let me just go to the SharePoint site, click on this link. That link just takes them to a page, and there is my form. And the other reason is that you can actually take that app and then also give full access to people who are all the time traveling. And if they're on tablet apps, so if you build a responsive type of app, then they can also use. So that would be one scenario where you have a Canvas app, use it at a desktop level. But remember, you can't switch to the other one. You can't have an edit form or a Canvas customized form, build it into an app. There is just no a migration process for that. So that's just a very important reason for the Canvas app and the way you're able to use it over there. Now, I want to look at this more from a SharePoint lens, because Reza just covered a lot about delegation and context in that context. I won't go too much into it, but when it comes to SharePoint, it still can handle pretty high amount of data from a Power App standpoint. And it all depends on how you've gone ahead and used the formula. So if you were to actually say, this is a very simple context that I came up with. Okay, it's actually one of the ones that I use a lot to give the users, the end users, a very user-friendly scenario that, hey, this is the data source. I've got some functionality to do a search if I start with, and I'm able to get some nice data over there. So I can do it in the sorting of an ascending or descending order. A very common formula that I see again and again used when you build an app. You've got SharePoint as a data source. This is the one that is used when you're doing a search and a sort in that gallery. This is a perfect formula. When you do something like that, you will not get that delegation type of error, because this combination works really well and you're not getting any delegation. This is 100 delegation errors. This is 100% delegable. So keep that in. That's just an example in there. And there's all in all more things that you got to be mindful of. Again, we won't go too much into delegations, but I want to keep some of these items in mind. And hopefully these are this is still the works. Because sometimes I'm teaching about this, and then I will go to the website and I'll see, oh, wait a minute, they've actually already taken care of that. So now what I said was non-delegable is delegable. So keep an eye on that. Just go into open up Bing or Google and you search for Power Apps delegation. You will get a website of all of these delegable data sources. So That is basically a really good scenario when it comes to how SharePoint works and some examples of what these formulas are. Other thing, though, is it can handle some very large data sources. And I will take a look at an example for that as well. I have actually a SharePoint list, right? This is a SharePoint list, and that list has 44,735 items. That's a lot, okay? And this is basically what it is. If you're just interested, this is a list which I have. It's just the state in the United States that I live in is North Carolina, and DOT stands for Department of Transportation. So there's some stats that I pulled from there, and I was able to upload it into the SharePoint list. If I now go into the SharePoint list, and if I go take a look at the list settings, as you know, it's already giving me the SharePoint stuff, right? It's telling me, hey, you've already, it's a little big. It's giving me some heads up on that, and then it's also telling me your threshold view is 500. So from a SharePoint perspective, it is telling that just be careful. You kind of already, you've got, considering how much data you have over here, you might run into a few hiccups and a few gotchas, which is purely from a SharePoint standpoint. But when you take a look at it from the Power App standpoint, it actually still works really well. Because remember that formula that I just told about is how you can use a combination of filter and starts with inside gallery. That is the formula that I applied over here. So one of the, let's go and see, one of the counties whose ID number is 1, and see in the app, we're doing it in a descending order. So I'm already looking at, the first 500 that I'm getting is in the 44,000. If I want to go and search for something right in this early one, I am already calling way past the 500 or even way past the 2,000 that I can pull, because that's what Power Apps can do with the max. Default is 500 items pulled, or you can bump it up to 2,000. But because SharePoint is a delegable data source, one. Secondly, is I've gone ahead and used the correct syntax of the formulas which work for SharePoint. I can search for this county and it will show up. So let's do a search for this county, and it's called Alum. I'm intentionally just putting as ALAM because of how I've gone ahead and do the starts with, it went ahead and pulled in LMS. You and I just saw in the SharePoint list, this is way past 500, way past 2,000. It's actually almost in, we're already doing a full server-side search, which means that the Power Apps right now searched across all 44,000 items on the SharePoint side, on the server side, and it went ahead and pulled in the first 500 of this county over there. This is the power of using Power Apps with SharePoint. SharePoint being a delegable data source, only one of the 4. Remember, there's over 450 data sources available, but SharePoint is only one of the 4 databases that is allowed to do this. This is the power of SharePoint with Power Apps. If you can't even remember anything else I say, think about just taking this, is that SharePoint, yes, Power Apps can handle some large data sources, again, if you do it the right way. Basically, I'm just repeating what Reza just said about 30 minutes ago. You do things the right way, and it works. It works really well. So that is one of the examples. This is one of my favorite examples that I show about when I do in fact, the session that Reza did, I also do the same thing about large data sets. This is one of my favorite examples. Now, I'll share some little tidbits I share with you. There's other ways to get around this to help it more from the user standpoint. I know the search, one of the biggest complaints people tell me is, but Daniel, if you're doing a search, it only works with starts with. I said, okay, in that case, go ahead and create a gallery. In this gallery, make sure that you have only all the items that you want people to search with. In that way, you don't want them to do a search and you don't have to worry about the starts with. You can just go ahead and click on it. And when you click on it, it'll go and filter it out all the way. So by the way, this item, this is the county called Cleveland, that's at the row number 8, it starts at 8,000. So you've already gone past that 2,000 limit and successfully tested it. I'll show you another trick. This other trick is one of the things actually I've started using it. And it's basically how this is constructed. So I'll actually have to go in and show that to you. But what I've done is I am doing a search now. Okay, and it looks like this is one line, one text. It's basically showing the ID. It's showing the street address. And so right now I see this route over here, and that is SR 15 something something. Let me just do 1549. And it is able to filter down and do it at that level. So people think about, hey, Daniel just gave me has a way to work around the starts with. In fact, it is actually a workaround, which means that if it was starts with, if SR wasn't right in the front, it shouldn't work. How did Daniel get this to do a filter successfully for a text which is almost way at the back? How did you do that, Daniel? And it's actually just a beautiful power of suggestion. When I go ahead and open this up, you will actually see that I just took different columns and I combined them. So for the end user in the app, it only looks like it's one sentence, but it's still actually different columns. It's what I did with the power of suggestion is I presented the data in a completely different way. And then I've actually gone ahead and still done a very proper search. See, here's the trick. If I go in, I click on the gallery, you will see that the gallery items are all to do with this formula. This is it. I've gone ahead and done a starts with or starts with, but basically the data that is being presented is this. Click on it. That is it. The data is this item.id, which is right here. Give me the street address. I mean, I'm putting in the text street address. Let me actually give me the address, which is coming from SharePoint. And I'm doing all of these things, and it's working really well. See, I've even used the in function just to present the data. And this is actually a little trick that I've been using. Is people say that, it's confusing for the people. How do I tell them that they can actually search text at the back as well? Use this idea, is present the data in one line, but your actual search, your actual filter is the exact same thing, sort by columns over there. So a new trick that I've been practicing a lot, and it's actually been really useful from the end user standpoint. I thought I'll share that with you all. But let's kind of continue talking about now, from switch gears and basically talk about it from Power Automate standpoint. So we talked about SharePoint, we talked about Power Apps. I want to now spend some time talking on Power Automate. Now we know that when you go to SharePoint List, you've got two ways that it is presented. There is the automate, and then there is the integrate. In case you did not know, this automate, which is just a very simple rule of if something comes in, and if it is submitted by this one user, then send me a notification or make this one change. It's usually one simple action. Did you know, I mean, you probably knew because it says automate, but just to confirm, this is also Power Automate doing its magic in the back end. Very simple process, but it's able to do it right there. This is Power Automate. Now, when you go to integrate, you see Power Automate. You can go ahead and create the flows. You can go ahead and configure the flows. And it's able to do all of that jazz directly in here inside the SharePoint list. And two very common ones that we've used a lot is automated flows or schedule it. When you go to Power Automate, automate flows means, hey, I went ahead and put in a SharePoint list item and a new item has been updated. Go ahead and trigger the flow. Or if a new existing item has been edited, go ahead and trigger the flow. This is actually one of the popular ones that you will see used for SharePoint. In fact, if you go to Power Automate, you go look at the templates and you search for whatever template type, this is the most hits you will get, a highest number of hits. Schedule flows are also helpful. Schedule flows are helpful if you want to run on a routine base for some SharePoint list that you want to keep it updated, or you want to do something to an entire SharePoint list. That's when you do the schedule flows over here. So it's pretty important piece. But I also want to touch two very important actions that I see a lot in SharePoint. And so it's the power of SharePoint. So get items is one of the very powerful ones that I see in SharePoint. If you go to and use the SharePoint connector, get items allows you to go ahead and do, again, a server-side filtering when you're making calls from Power Automate. Filter query basically is making an OData call to SharePoint and saying that, hey, I want you to get certain items, but I don't want to go and get all those items, because imagine that one list I showed you, 44,000 items. I don't want to pull 44,000 items and then do a filter action in that. No, I want to go ahead and do the filtering at the SharePoint level, directly at the server level, let it do filtering, and then whatever is the delta data that comes in, it will come in, and it'll go ahead and do the flows based on that. So what an example over here would be, I want to just do a filtering based on the state that I live in. And I could do a double filtering, state and county, so I get much more filter data. This, again, is the power of SharePoint. Now with Power Automate, we just saw Power Apps. This is now Power Automate. Again, because SharePoint is a delegable data source, you are able to use that magic. So I highly recommend that if you haven't already done it this way, start adopting this way. Because remember, like Reza said, if you call Reza and if you want him to take a look at your flow, say, I'm having flow problems, it is running too fast. In Power Apps, he said that he's going to look at that delegation problem. Right here in Power Automate, I guarantee you, he's going to come to your flow and he's going to say, why are you pulling all the data? Go ahead and use get items. Go ahead and do the filtering. This is what you want to do. Now, on the same breath, there are other really powerful ones in Power Automate. See, this function is called a send an HTTP request to SharePoint. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. So, Daniel, HTTP request, red flag immediately. Oh, more licensing, more licensing. No, this is not your HTTP action where it's a premier connector and you've got to, pay an arm and a length and give your firstborn and all of that jazz. No, this is not that HTTP. This is still the SharePoint connector, which is a standard connector, which means it comes with your enterprise and business Microsoft 365 license. And in it, there is actually an action already available just to make an HTTP call. And again, here's an example of how SharePoint is so much more directly tied into Power Automate, because you can use this action, and you can go ahead and say, okay, based on whatever change happened, if something was, a SharePoint list was changed, I am going to be able to now send an email, not from the person who created the flow or not from the person who added or edited the item. The email comes directly from SharePoint Online. This is huge. And I say it huge if you're a new person coming into SharePoint, but if you were, back when we were in on-prem and we used to build the SharePoint designer workflows, this always happened. Workflows directly came from SharePoint. When we switched over to Power Automate and went to the cloud, they gave us that same flexibility. Saying, hey, SharePoint has got so many API connections already available. Power Automate is going to leverage them, and they're going to give you that same flexibility. Because that when an email is coming, I'm going to give you the flexibility that, hey, this email didn't come from a specific person. It just came from SharePoint, that a new item was added over there. Again, see, this, when I start showing you these little, trinkets, you start to understand, how SharePoint is so far ahead than all these other connectors that you would see. I mean, I hate to say it, Excel and OneDrive won't give you this type of fidelity level, as you can see in SharePoint over here. But I want to kind of share another great news. If you are still one of those people who are in on-prem and thinking about it, in fact, now would be a good time, because they just announced this at Ignite, is that you will be able to take your on-prem workflows and migrate them over to Power Automate. I do want to call this out. This was an announcement that was made last week. So in fact, Reza and I talked about it in our video too, in our R&D show, is that this is something we're cautiously optimistic about. Because there's actually not much documentation that says which on-prem workflows. You and I know, SharePoint people know, on-prem workflows means there's 2010 workflows and there's 2013 type of workflows. Does this handle both? Right now, we really don't know. So I personally am very cautiously excited about this, but it tells me one important thing, is that it tells me that there's such a high demand for Power Automate, specifically for those SharePoint people, that they went ahead and actually built this tool. Remember, this was not available, and Power Automate has been out now for over 4 years. So for the 4 years now, this was not available, but they just saw, based on statistics, how much workflows are being run from SharePoint, and they still know that, hey, people are migrating from on-prem to online. With the migration tool, they've added this new feature. So I'm pretty stoked about this one. I will personally test it to really know exactly what all it can and cannot do, and we'll find out. But I'm excited about that. Okay, so let's actually, you know what? I do want to show you one thing. So I'll show you an example of the flow that I have. Is the HTTP request one. Yep, it's right here. So this is basically what the formula of that SharePoint HTTP request happens, is you're able to go ahead and use very specific URLs that you have to use, and then you have to go ahead and put in what is the header, basically give them an update on how what's the JSON connection that you're making. And granted, there's a little bit of HTML/XML coding that you have to use, but other than that, if you, like me, can do a copy and paste, that's all I do. I do a lot of copying and pasting. I mean, this is not code I write. I do a lot of copying and pasting. I see example that I go and copy and paste it, and then I tweak it to my example. Because right here, I don't have to, once I go and put the syntax correctly, I can just go ahead and grab any of these other formulas that I want, or not formulas, any of these other controls that I want. It's very dynamic. So it gives you that full fidelity to go ahead and replicate a lot of things you're already used to. One example is going in and making SharePoint calls for working on stuff like that. Cool. This is a good segue now to switch over to Power BI, because Power BI gives you a lot of functionality to go ahead and make that change out of the box. So my slide actually just shows you exactly what I'm going to show you right now. Is granted, that you can go ahead and make connections to directly to your Power BI report or your dashboard. You can directly make a connection to SharePoint Online. You can actually make it delegable, which means if you make it's called, from Power BI standpoint, it's called direct query. So when you make changes to a SharePoint list, that change will reflect on your Power BI report. But again, out of the box, they have given you this level of functionality. So if you go to, this is my list. It's got about 2,000, 2,200 items in it. So it's got a good amount of data in it. But this is a place where I go ahead and just store all the meal orders that are taken. So it's used by a fast food place, by their app. People go ahead and put in orders for hamburgers, barbecues, pizzas, whatnot. I just want a quick glimpse of how many orders were put in. And I don't have to go ahead and open up Power BI. I don't have to open up, I don't have to open up any changes whatsoever. Make a connection, go ahead and build visualizations, none of that. I just come to my SharePoint list, go to integrate, go to Power BI, and I just say, I want to visualize this list. And it automatically took me into Power BI. It automatically went and put all of these visualizations right there. And this is exactly what I wanted to see. All I did was one click. I just went and clicked on that visualization, and it went and presented all of this automatically. And it gives me a little bit more functionality too. I can go ahead and now change to the coloring. I want to change a little bit of the coloring style. I do want to see a little bit more information about, say, the breadsticks. Did you just see what I did over here? We built this report in record time, literally less than 2 minutes. And why? Because it was a one-click process. That, again, see, it's the power. Yes, it's the power of Power BI, but it's the SharePoint's deep integration with Power BI, such that, again, as a reminder, I came into the list. This is a ribbon that's automatically available, and you'd say that, hey, your data is great. See, and it didn't need any more information. It didn't come and say, oh yeah, I need to know what is this column type. I need to know what that SharePoint column type is. Do you want to, no, it massaged all the data, everything behind the scenes, open this directly up into Power BI report, and now you can go ahead and publish this to a list. You can go do other stuff. All of this was done automatically. That is the power of Power BI with its deep integration into the SharePoint piece. This always puts a smile on my face, because we built this report in record time directly because of that deep integration into Power BI. So always super excited about that piece. Cool. So we talked about the Power BI. Showed you this example that I had in Power BI. But finally, I want to end with what I call the new kid on the block. All of you actually know about the singing group back in the day. I call the Power Virtual Agents as the new kid on the block, because even though it is the latest member of the family, if you think about it, it actually sits on the top of the pyramid, because Power Virtual Agents will leverage Power Apps, especially a lot of Power Automate, and it also leverages Power BI for its images. What it does do is it's using Power Automate. It is able to talk back and forth, and all the chat bots that you do, well, the bot is able to chat using data directly from a SharePoint list. And then once you've got your your chatbot built, you can directly just go and embed that into your site. And there is a direct a widget available in SharePoint to go ahead and do that embedding. If you are a coder, then you can go ahead and use SharePoint Framework, to build a custom responsive web part. But if you just go ahead and use the HTML web part in SharePoint, you can just go ahead and get the link directly from Power Virtual Agents. So let me show you a demo on that as well. We'll go now straight into my new tenant, my different tenant. And right here is a SharePoint list that I have. In fact, that's a demo resume I had done a long time ago. This list contains a very simple example. It just tells you, hey, this is the title of all the, some of the videos Daniel has done. It's what is the content? Well, it's a type video. Authors, some are the Daniel, some are Reza, and here is the link. But this is boring. I mean, I put the link, I put the data over here. I want to make it such that the end users can actually have a discussion to get this data. And what better way to do it is with the chatbot. So I've now got my chatbot over here. This bot is embedded into a SharePoint screen. And I'm going to now just call, say, Reza. I'll just type in Reza, okay? Or I could just put in Reza stuff, something. There's a discussion going on directly now with the chatbot, and the bot is said that, hey there, welcome to the R&D show chatbot. Great choice. Reza has some amazing content. Let me give them to you. And it went ahead and ran a Power Automate flow, and that Power Automate flow scanned through that SharePoint list, picked up all the items which had to do with anything to do with Reza, and it went and presented that in a list over here in a very good list type of fashion. The bot is so smart that it just saw the name Reza. It automatically went and skipped a few of its logic steps, and it even leveraged Power Automate. But I'll say, let's do another thing. So anything else, I'll say yes. This is no worries. Let's start from the beginning. Both Reza and Daniel having learning content. Anyone in particular you're interested in? Again, this is just a discussion that I'm having with the bot. So I say, yep, I'm interested in Daniel's stuff. And it's now running the Power Automate, and it went and pulled all my information. So let's just take a look at the chatbot for just a few seconds, right? So this is basically the bot that I have, okay? And the bot topic that I've created is the R&D learning content. And I come in, and in here, you will actually now see what is the logic of the bot. So I go now to the authoring canvas, and in my authoring canvas, I've got all of this logic coming in. See, some of this we actually just saw it in action, that it was both Reza and Dan having a discussion. It's giving me all this information. And once I go ahead and select somebody's name, it grabs that name and it goes ahead and runs this flow. This is the flow. What the flow, and if I refresh it, you'll actually see the two other flows that we just tested. You'll actually see more successful flows. But let's see what that flow does, all right? I want to actually spend a little bit, amount of time explaining that as well. So I'm going into the flow, and in the flow, you will see that what the trigger is actually coming in from Power Virtual Agents. Come on, Howard, you can do it. Come on, come on. All right, give it another refresh. Reload. Anyway, when it works really well. It's going ahead, it'll load to show you. The main things I wanted to show you is how when it triggers, the top trigger is, oh, there you go, finally. In the trigger, the initial amount I get from the trigger information is that, hey, it gave me a user information, and it is going ahead and sending me some information. So that's how this works. Is when I go ahead and look at my flow, it goes ahead and sends what the user's information is, and then it goes ahead and presents the information that I got. The information I got, and I'll just show you, is see the get items that I talked about? In the get items, I am doing a filter query, an OData call, a server-side call, just saying that, hey, the author's name, which is this list author, starts with this user. So in the chatbot, people don't have to know, like, oh, should I put Daniel or should I put Dan? I say, no, just put whatever it is. And the flow is smart enough to say, hey, the text start, as long as it has just enough, like, usually it's the 3 characters, which is the magic number. It has enough, it'll go ahead and pull all that information. Once it's pulling in, it doesn't apply to each. I'm going and appending it into this variable using the markdown style. And then after that, this variable is what I respond over here, back to Power Virtual Agent, and Power Virtual Agent just presents it in this way. What does take a little bit of effort on Power Automate's markdown style pays off really well because it presents the data right over here. And this was it. You successfully, using low code, created a chatbot which made the interaction with the end user so much more easy. While using Power Automate, it now went ahead and directly talked to your SharePoint list and it presented this data. So this deep integration you have with Power Virtual Agents directly with SharePoint takes your conversation with the end users to a whole different level. I mean, I didn't even have to tell people to come into Power, into your SharePoint list or go ahead and present this list as a table in an FAQ site. No, let's just do it with the bot. Let people have this interaction directly in the bot, and it just works so well. So is one of my favorite examples of how I can go in and leverage bot to have just a conversation directly inside a Power App and inside your SharePoint site. Cool. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about other functionalities, which were actually, and some of them were announced in Ignite. So we know that Microsoft List, and I'm not deviating away, Microsoft List, as we know, is just a little more enhanced version of a SharePoint list. In Microsoft Lists, you are able to still go ahead and leverage the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate. But did you realize this one announcement that they made in Ignite, which was last week? This is a huge one. This, when Reza and I saw this, our jaw dropped, because this is everything that we've asked for. Well, what is it, Daniel? This is basically, you go ahead and now create your forms, your Power Apps, customized forms, and your Power Automate workflows. You can package that together as a list template and then migrate that across to anywhere else. Basically, out-of-the-box list templates will soon be packaged with built-in Power Automate forms and pre-made rules, which is the Power Apps and stuff like that. This is huge, because right now, what I've had to do is if I've got an app which is built with Power Apps, I would export that separately. I would export the SharePoint list separately. I would export the Power Apps separately too. And granted, I could build some solutions. That's a whole separate topic altogether. But either way, I had to do it independent of the SharePoint list. Well, now I can package the whole thing using the power of lists. And this I am super excited about. I'm waiting for this thing to come out, because this is going to give you that full fidelity about taking everything that you've already built, packaging it together, and moving it. In fact, this is going to replicate what us on-prem people were doing for years. On-prem, we had SharePoint Designer workflows, we had InfoPath Designer forms. Whenever I would export that SharePoint list, and for all of you people on this call, it's on-prem, you export that list. Remember that file name, STP file? Yeah. When we would export and import an STP file, we used to get the form, InfoPath form, and the workflow together. This is going to replicate that. So I'm super, super excited about this. I could almost cry. That's how excited I am. So all in all, we went ahead and looked at all of this information. Okay? And I put Teams in because we know backend of SharePoint is Teams, and there's so much integration. This is what the power of SharePoint is, and deep integration directly with Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agent, and Power BI. It works really well. And as you can see, you can go on and building more stuff. Now, there is one last thing I want to talk about, and that is SharePoint is not a relational database. So what relational database means? Okay, so we know from back in the SQL days, even Dataverse has it, is that I can go ahead and interconnect different tables such that when I'm going and using formulas, or when I'm going and calling one table column, if that table column is directly related to another table's column, when I'm putting a formula for that column, I just put a dot and all the other column names show up. That is the power of relational database. It's been there in SQL forever. It's there in Dataverse too. It's not there in SharePoint. Now, if you are considering to move away from SharePoint for whatever reason, if you start looking at SQL, Oracle, then you're going to go into a higher payment plan. Take a look at Dataverse, because Dataverse has that full flexibility of building relational databases. But if you're going to stick with SharePoint, I've got 4 videos on how to go ahead and use SharePoint for that. That's actually one of my highest watched videos too. Go take a look at that, because there is some workarounds for using SharePoint as well. But I always want to call this out. As much as I've bragged about SharePoint, I always end in this note, is that, remember, SharePoint is not a relational database. All right, so keep that in mind. And if you are going to go ahead and start, working with SharePoint, say, man, I have a lot of lists now, and it's getting a little cumbersome to get all those lists interconnected. Think about your next data source that you want to have. If you've got skill of SQL in your company, then go ahead and leverage SQL. But if you're starting fresh, then as it is, you're going to have to pay for a higher amount anyway. Take a look at Dataverse. See what you can find over there. So I want to end on this note. Once again, my name is Daniel Christian. That's my Twitter handle. Thank you so much for inviting me and speaking over here. I know I wasn't able, I kind of said I'll look at the mixed reality and AI. We just didn't have time for that. Call me back and I'll do a full session on mixed reality for you all, and we can have fun things. You'll see all the stuff that I can put a whole gazebo in my office over here. I put some crazy stuff in my office. So if you invite me over, and I'll show you fun things, and we can have some fun. But that's basically all it is. I'm going to pause. I'll take a sip of water, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Daniel, I'm definitely going to take you up on that one. And actually, I wondered if we could do a bit of a temperature check with everybody. I know a lot of people are leaving. We're at time. But I took part in the Ignite Alt Space this year, and it was awesome. How do we all feel about doing something actually virtual with Daniel and attending in a virtual space so that we can all hang out and well, I was going to say have arms and legs, but they actually don't have any legs.
They don't have any legs.
Which is kind of weird. But I reckon we at least get Daniel back to show us some of this virtual stuff. But I would love to see if anybody is up for meeting up in AltSpace and having some more kind of real-time networking. I think that would be really great and kind of a half step towards getting back together again. Of course, even when we do get back together again, we can't realistically get Daniel here in person, so that's going to be virtual anyway, right, Daniel? You're slightly further away from Cambridge than I would like.
I'm 1 hour closer than Reza, though. I'm on the east side, so pick me first. Don't pick Reza. Although it's an R&D show, so it's usually him and I go together.
Noted. We'll do a virtual R&D show. That'd be awesome. Okay, again, a brilliant talk, great session, amazing stuff, much requested features, all high praise, Daniel, as would be expected. Fantastic session. Thank you for sharing that with us. And everybody do go and connect with Daniel. And again, subscribe to his YouTube channel. Loads of good stuff on there. And I've been on there far more times than I probably should admit for solving problems and getting some hints and tips. Let me just take back over again just to finish off the session and say that we will be putting everything live on YouTube. So we'll be splitting up each of the sessions, so you haven't got to watch the whole meeting. So Daniel will have his own segment, as will May and Reza, and we'll stick that up. That goes on my YouTube channel. So just do a quick search for me on YouTube. Quick mention, if you wanted to become a sponsor, we're always up for anybody who wants to do swag or giveaways or anything like that. Get in touch if you'd like to sponsor an Amazon voucher for a giveaway on one of our user groups. Get in touch via Patreon and we'll sort that out for you. So that just means that leaves me to say thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you next time. Could you pencil in your diaries January the 26th, which is when we're looking to be back. And if Daniel's available, we might do a little bit of VR. I reckon that's a really good shout. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, Daniel, Reza and May, if you're still on the call. Thank you so much for all of the content. Do come and find the user group on the community page. We have moved into the Microsoft Communities area under user groups. Come and join us so that you get all the hints and tips and you get notifications of when those videos go live. We really look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you again, Daniel, for being here. And thanks everybody for attending.